I couldn't go, okay, well, these stories are real. For me, I couldn't believe that they were. And that was sad for me. But I could take those other elements that I did, like gratitude, or like having faith in humanity, and just going, okay, there's going to be bad things. I'm going to have things stolen from me. That's definitely happened. I feel like, but I've had it so many times where people go, why are you leaving the doors of your car unlocked while you're going and like unloading gear? Why are you doing this, or why are you doing that? And it's because because I still have faith in people, even though there's a few. The overall are good, and that's what I've always. That's part of what I took away from a community of religion.
Welcome to Faith and What Resonates, a show that explores the intersection of faith, spirituality, music, and how we make meaning in the world. I'm Gail Gallagher, professional musician and lifelong seeker. I am a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church, and one of our core principles is that everyone has their own free and responsible search for truth and meaning. On this show, I highlight other people's journeys as we explore the magic of the things that resonate. My guest today is Matt Griffo, and this is really exciting. Matt is a musician. He is in the music and comedy scene in Chicago, and we've crossed paths many times, but we've never sat down and had a long conversation until now, and you get to hear it. And I absolutely love the curiosity and joy and whimsy that Matt brings into his work and his general way of being. So this conversation goes a lot of places, and we're just going to get into it. So here we go. Okay, I am here on the Zoom with Matt Griffo. Hello.
Hello, it's me, Matt Griffo.
Yeah, welcome to the show. Can you tell the audience just a little bit about what you do in the world?
I love comedy and I love music, and so I generally, for most of my projects that I do, I combine both of those things. Whether it's me having years ago music directed, toured with Second City, which is a comedy theater, and or having done different sketch shows or improvisational music, whether it's with an improv group or it's solo and I'm improvising songs, or now a lot of times I'm performing for speakeasies and stuff like that. So it's alongside a lot of burlesque or hula hoopers, contortionists, magicians, strong would be classically said as strong men, but strong people, because it's all types of people. And then it's me. So then it'll be music and comedy. So the lyrics are satirical in some way.
Cool. I like how you separate out I do music and I do comedy, and often together. But I find sometimes as a musician, if you do funny stuff, it's like, and you're funny all the time. And that isn't always there's this weird pressure to you have to be funny all the time. And it's like, no, you're full human.
Yeah. And when I'm doing a show at a whatever club, if it's a theater or if it's a comedy club, or I normally don't perform at comedy clubs because they don't have good sound setups usually. Sometimes they have amazing sound setups. So when they do, good on them. but my dog is cranky about something. But yeah, there's if it's set up that the audience is like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna see this show and I'm gonna laugh, and I know that this particular performer isn't gonna stress me out. Like, this guy isn't gonna talk about any politics. He's gonna talk about sex, but it's all gonna be like really fun, uplifting. And comparatively, if I suddenly do a serious song, they're going to keep wondering where the joke is, where's the punchline, and then it's going to be the end of it. I mean, even if I say, just so you know, this song is truly is a very serious song. They're all going to be like, wow, this is going to be so funny. This is going to be the funniest. And then by the end of the song, the serious song, they're going to be really disappointed. So there is that. There is absolutely that. So I don't combine those two in a set, because it would, if I was to do that, it would have to be top loaded serious songs and funny. It would have to be, because otherwise it would be confusing.
No, I get that. That's actually useful information for me, because I do like approachably angsty musical theater stuff that is funny, but like, but then I, get to the bridge and punch people in the heart and go away. Like that's kind of my setup.
Punch them right in the heart.
Yeah, that's what bridges are for. Anyway, so as this is a podcast where we deep dive on how we make meaning, I am curious if you could sort of break down the sort of like your faith background, like just the general, like how it started, how it's going, and what that looks like.
Oof. I'm going to do the briefest synopsis.
Okay.
I grew up Roman Catholic with a bunch of Italians, a bunch of Italian Americans, and then went to communion, was never did my confirmation. At that point, my parents were like, this is a choice now. You have to do the first part. You don't have to do the last part. So I think my dad was pretty disappointed that I didn't want to do the confirmation. But I was very curious about all of it. So I continued. I was not really, I had a lot of people in my life who were religious. And I didn't really care, because I was like, well, it's this thing that people go to and they talk and I have to go to it. And then I go play with my friends. And that was fun, the social aspect. But then my buddy said, hey, my family's going to go to church. Do you want to come with me? I was so bored. And I thought, I'll go to church, because I was bored at home. I'll go to this church. He said, there's a rock band. And I was like, I love music. Bands? Cool. So I went, and it was a born again church, and the songs were easy to remember, and the band was good. And I was like, this is cool. We can sit in all the way in the back of this church and talk about random stuff and flirt with girls. And I love this. And so I kept going every Sunday. And then I started joining the youth group. And the problem that it was that they said, go study the Bible. And I did. And for this particular church, it was very, what's in there is there. That's like, it's pure fact, right? So as I'm reading the Bible, I was seeing that that's not, it's logically couldn't be, simply because the stories didn't match up. And I would come into youth group and be like, this isn't saying right. If you're saying this is pure fact, these two stories they actually are two different timelines. And they didn't like that. And so then there was one time where there was a sermon, and they said, okay, so you can pray anywhere. You don't have to come into church. You can pray anywhere you want. Church is wherever you are. You never have to feel you have to come into church in order to pray. God's always with you. And I was like, that's great. So I woke up the next Sunday, and I was really tired, and I thought, I can pray from here. And I went back to sleep. I was like, this is what I want. I want to pray in bed. And so I went to sleep. The next Sunday, they were like, where were you? You weren't in youth group. And I said, I was sleeping. And then they said, verbatim, said, you couldn't wake up for Jesus? The three pastors cornering me said this. And I was so threatened. And I just that was it. I was like, bye. I was like, I'm done now. And this is the type of church that had a lot of people speaking in tongues. And I was super curious, like, what is this? Is this real? I would go up to those people who were in the front, going with their arms up, speaking in tongues. And I would be focused, laser focused on them, because I wasn't allowed into the church at that time, because I wasn't allowed into the church until I let Jesus in my heart. And I wasn't allowed to be in the church until I let Jesus in my heart, until I heard Jesus. And I was like, I literally need to hear him. And they were like, yes. And every Sunday they'd be like, did you hear him yet? And I would say, no, I haven't. And I'm thinking, am I screwed up? Are these people hearing him and I've got nothing? Like, what's wrong with me? And every Sunday there'd be people brought into the church. The pastor would put his hand on their head and they would like fall over. And I'm thinking, how come I don't do that? Why don't I do that? Something's wrong here. And then I've got a problem. And so then I eventually just came into church and lied. And I just said, yes, I heard Jesus. And then they were like, finally. And then they did the thing. They brought me to the front and they were very excited and proud that I heard Jesus. And I didn't. But I was like, what happens next if I say that? So they put their hand on my head and they pushed me and I didn't fall over. And then he looked a little mad about it. And then he did it again and he did it a little harder. And I still was like just standing there. And everyone in the church kind of looked like, you're supposed to fall over now. And I was kind of just confused. Like, I thought to myself, this is the part where I'm supposed to get some surge like everybody else does and fall over. I don't feel that. What are you talking about? Anyway, so I left that church and then I started to really volunteer for Lutheran churches. I started volunteering for Catholic churches. And I had already read the Bible at this point multiple times. But it was really that I really wanted to understand what do they bring to people's lives and how could that help? And was this real? Was this thing that I couldn't figure out real? Right. And it was really getting at me. And so I was in all these choirs and it was great. And I had so much community and I loved it. And I eventually just moved to Chicago and I was still, very, very much religious and faithful to the overall Christian faith. I would say ecumenical at that point, like taking different parts of different Christian faiths to bring it into my own, right? And and then over time, the more I for myself that I broke it down, the more I thought, okay. And I took kind of my friend Krista, who's an amazing Lutheran pastor. She really sees it as stories, really great stories that we can. We're there's going to be a lot of stories that are wacky. There's a lot of stories in there that people can use in positive ways and how to create community and she really takes it that way and brings together a lot of different, not just Christian faiths, but a lot of leaders of other religious faiths and comes together in communities to do good and bring positivity into the world. And so in the end, I realized for myself that because there was no logic, the more I critically thought into religious texts, not just the Bible, but into the Torah, into the Quran, or into even other polytheistic religions. There were too many holes, and I couldn't have the faith to just simply believe it, and which is thereby where faith derives from, is that you have faith. So I didn't. I came to accept I just didn't have faith, and then I realized, okay, well, I'm just an atheist. And so I read a really great book called "Why There Is No God." for a long time, I would say I was agnostic. And after I read Why There Is No God, which it's free if you wanted to look it up online, it was a really great way for me to go, oh, okay, I'm definitely an atheist. But also, if somebody who's really religious listening to this, if you were to go, what's an atheist think? And the reason I read that book was because I thought, why? I've read all these religious texts, but I've never read a text on atheism. I've read all these mythologies, but never anything on that. And so that's when I read that, and it was really good. But yeah, if there's somebody who's religious, I think reading Why There Is No God's also good, so that they can go, well, what are their counterpoints? And how can I be strong in my own faith with it? I can understand these counterpoints, but then how can I use those counterpoints and still be really strong within my own faith? And I think that's really great.
Yeah, I think I wanna check that one out. And yeah, that's a good recommend. That was a journey, and there's so many jumping off points that I can think of to go from there, and I love it. And I will say, it sounds like there's definitely a very similar background. I actually was raised both Catholic and Unitarian at the same time. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I had gone to Unitarian as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I did not get confirmed. And that was a whole thing. And I chose not to get confirmed Catholic because we had a priest who would go on tangents about how gay people were going to hell. And meanwhile, at the Unitarian Church, like, we had a lesbian theology professor who would preach about all of
yeah. Wild. So you would have, a lot of kids wouldn't have had those two opposing viewpoints at once. That's interesting.
Yeah. And my mom was more like atheist inclined, but I think in that similar like viewpoint of her flavor of atheism was looking at stories and looking at how different patterns come together and things like that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to segue because you were talking about stories, and so your podcast talks about, or your podcast is all about taking people's stories and then having like musical improvisers make up stuff around it, and it's very fun and zany,
moving the story along.
Yeah. And I'm curious if if there's like a connection, or if that sort of connects with your view of how you make meaning through stories.
I would say so. This is a great question. This is a deep question I haven't thought to myself, but I love mythology and I love theology to a deep core of my being. and it's thereby I love stories. And I wanted to do a show that I wanted it to be a TV show first. And I made a pilot for it. And then I contacted, do you know Fred Armisen?
Or like, did you just say Fred Armisen? Or wait.
Yeah.
I know.
So I contacted Fred, and we talked about the show, but he wasn't. I was wondering if he was either wanted to be in it in some way or produce it. And he was like, no, I've got other projects going on. It's an interesting project, but I can't do that right now. And I was like, okay. So I thought, well, that's out. Fred's out. So I wanted to figure out, and I sent it to other places too, and they were like, this seems like a show that would be expensive to make, which is maybe true. But I really wanted to do it. So I thought, well, we could improvise it. We could improvise the music. It doesn't have to be written out, because originally it was going to be written out. But the basic concept of like a real story, a true story being told and then improvised. And it's just, you do get that same vibe from, that's interesting to think about. You do get that same vibe from, I don't want to say a church, but a temple gathering of people improvising together. And musicians improvising is just different. It's fun. You don't know what's going to happen. There's going to be mistakes, and the mistakes are great. And you want to hear a story, and especially if it's a true story, something that really happened, and it's still very engaging. It has another element of like, really? Did this really happen? And so bringing it to the even more emotional aspect of it's so big that we have to sing about it. It just makes it very fun.
For sure. The episode that I listened to last night was the Norwegian cheese fire one.
What a wacky one. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, which listeners, I will just drop a link to that episode in the show notes. We'll just start you there because that's where I started.
That was hard. That was the hardest one I think I did because of Asgeir. He was doing it in Norway, and I just took the audio from his iPhone in the room that he was in, and boy, was that room extremely reflective. It's like, oh no, this audio is terrible, and I had to work so hard to make that work.
Yeah.
But I love the episode. It's very funny.
Yeah. No, the episode is very funny. And like the arc of it is like I was listening to it on my commute, and I was just like, how are you making me feel feelings about cheese being on fire?
Yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah. So great. Asgeir really did an amazing job putting that story together.
Yeah.
He loves that cheese.
It's very important cheese.
It's a very rich cheese. It's intense.
Yeah. And I feel like the vibe is very similar to this. There's this show called Small Triumph, Big Speech that was running during the shutdown or during the lockdown. Dylan Marin was hosting it, and the idea is people would be selected to tell a story of a small triumph, like I did my laundry today, or I sent in that application I've been meaning to send. And then a famous writer would do a graduation style speech about like their big win. And
that's very funny.
Yeah, but it is this both of these shows sort of like celebrate these ordinary moments in these like epic proportions, and I think that's really cool.
True, that's absolutely true, and I do feel it. I do, there's some. My partner says, I'll say like, "All right, have a fun day, like have fun," and she's like, "I'm not gonna have fun getting like a haircut." I'm like, "Really? It could be fun though." She's like, "What?" Or I'm like, "Are you excited about going to? I don't know. Are you excited about like going out to the movies tonight?" And she's like, "No." And I'm like, "Really?" Because I'm excited. And I genuinely get excited about little things. Yeah. And I don't know why that is. And I think it might be part of it is from religion that I was trained to be grateful. And when I'm just feeling down, I can go back to those elements of what different churches taught me that were really positive, which was, what am I grateful for? And suddenly I get really excited for the things that I have in my life. Even if, for some other people, they're like, well, this isn't great. There's so many things that can be great. And so much of it is perception.
Yeah, you have this, and I think that gratitude and that sort of like, I don't want to say whimsy, but I'm going to say whimsy because it's fun.
That's a good one. I do feel a lot of whimsy.
You have a lot of whimsy, and it comes out in your stuff, and I think that resonates with me because I have a similar like, you just, a part of being in comedy is just being fascinated by things and building that into how you build your structures and whatnot, jokes and whatnot. Yeah.
And also part of that comes from part of a lot of satire, but my satire comes from the sarcasm of so many things in life that are, I don't know, that just like that we have these boxes that we're put in, and like, why are we in these? And I'm so sassy. So I like to play and have fun with things. And when I was a little kid, my friend Dave, probably when I was like 7, my friend Dave's grandfather, he said, "Hey Dave, don't you hang out with that Griffo kid. He's a smartass." And I'm sure I said something very smart alecky to that old man. I'm sure I did. But that's also part of whimsy, I feel like, is like goofing off.
Yeah. Finding that whimsy, I think, also is an element of, can be an element of faith. Like, it's very much like there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of just messed up stuff, but here's some stuff that's really fun and exciting. Can we talk about that? Like, you know, it's not necessarily like toxic positivity, but it's like, no, it's like, yes, and also here's all this other stuff that's really not, you know, really cool.
Right. Like I think in bringing light to those wacky parts, the like darker parts of those religious texts is very, to me, funny to show. You know, we don't need to worry. We can just take the elements that we like, because that's really what we're always doing in life. I mean, there's absolutely things that we could always be like, well, this is terrible and this isn't great. But there's also the opposite, that we can be like, I have fingers. Like, that's awesome. I get so excited that I have these fingies. They're great. But like when I would, in like youth group, I remember bringing the story of Lot and his daughters. Do you know that one?
Yeah.
And for I'm sure your listeners, I'm sure you know the story, but I'm going to go through it for anybody who doesn't. The basics of it are that after Lot's wife turned to salt because she looked back at Sodom and Gomorrah, and the angel was like, "Don't do that," and then she turned into salt, and they left her. They went to a cave. Lot and his daughters went to a cave. And the cave, they thought because Sodom and Gomorrah were just destroyed, they thought everything's gone. We are the last people on earth. And his daughters thought, well, we're going to have to repopulate the earth. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, we have our father. So then in the Bible, depending on which one it is, like the King James version will say, I think like they got their father. I don't think they'll say drunk, but they like gave him drink, and they lay with their father. And I remember I came into youth group and I was like, what's that mean? And they were like, oh God. I was like, they went to sleep, and they were like, "Ay!" And so, you know, they explain it. But so, you know, one night, first daughter slept with her dad, had sex with her dad. And then the next night, the other daughter had sex with her dad. I do think they did have like a lot of children of their fathers. And that's like a wacky part of the Bible. And there's a bunch of those parts. But then there's a lot of like really lovely parts of like Jesus being a kook. I'm like, we don't need money. And everyone's like, what do you mean, Jesus? And then he just throws a table and he's like, screw all this stuff. And they're like, Jesus? Like, of course this man got arrested. He was like throwing tables and he was like destroying things. Yes, he was like flipping everybody out. That's what would happen now. They would arrest that person. But that's also why Jesus is so awesome, is because he didn't have the cultural norms. That's what I love about that. And that's the kind of stuff where I'm like, that is whimsy. And it's so silly to think about this man who everybody's like, so what a fun loving, sweet man. But he's like, no, toss this. We don't need these coins. I love that. That's the part of Jesus I really enjoy.
Or in Jesus Christ Superstar, where that's where you get your rock whale, which is wonderful.
Wait, please explain that part.
Oh, you You know Jesus Christ Superstar, right?
I watched it once a long time ago.
Okay, cool. In the temple scene, he goes into like full like rock skrelt, and he's like, "My temple should be a house of prayer." That part.
Yes, I do know that part. That's
Okay.
very good.
Cool. I'm always down to like go on a deep dive on JCS because I think that Jesus Christ Superstar is like my preferred gospel because it's very much like portraying. I guess maybe there's a whimsy to it, but it's also like a musical theater realness to it, where it's like, what if we portray Jesus as a man who has a lot of feelings and sings about him with his rock voice?
I'm absolutely positive from those stories he must have had a lot of feelings. If you're to the point where you're going to throw a table, you've got a lot of feelings.
You're processing a lot right now. Like,
right.
Yeah. Well, and that's I think that's like part of the thing to think about is like, okay, so you know you're going to die and you know that everything is falling apart and you're going to throw some tables. Like, you know?
Yeah, things are getting real fast for that guy.
Things were getting real for Jesus.
Yeah, true story.
True story. I'll be back to my conversation with Matt Griffo in a minute, but I wanted to tell you about some things that are happening with New Faith New Media. As you know, this show is produced through New Faith New Media, a brand new interfaith podcast network. And we are currently in the last week of our crowdfunding campaign to go towards getting ourselves a website, which will include our own discussion forums where we can build a space for theology, nerdery, and community, because that's a hard thing to do in a Facebook group. So if you want to support this effort, you can go to bit.ly/NFNMindie. That's bit.ly/NFNMINDIE. That link is also in the show notes. And I wanted to shout out the people who have donated so far. So special thanks to Nona Morrison, Cece Otto, Sue Burke, Lindsey Brown, Cameron Hood, CJ Tour, Richard Bell, Katie Oberly, Lori Morrison, Susan Lavelle, and Al Cole. Thank you so much for your support. Again, if you want to support us, you can head to the link that will be in the show notes. And if you are hearing this after Friday, March 4th, don't worry, you can still help us out by donating through Buy Me a Coffee or becoming a member of our Patreon. And those links are in the notes as well. Thank you so much for your support. And now, back to the conversation with Matt. Oh, man. Yeah, this could be its own segment of you just, like, going off on Bible stories. But I love how you bring all of this, like, that sense of whimsy into even, like, you know, unpacking these things. Like, it's just the pure nature of just being like, what's going on here? Which also has this very just childlike thing to it.
And going off of childlike, it's, you know how children will say, "What's with that thing on your head?" And then a person will be like, "Well, that's a mole." And they're like, "Why?" Or like they'll say like, "What is that?" Or, you know, and they'll explain it. Or you know, the person will be like, "I just got out of the hospital," and be like, "What were you doing in the hospital?" And they'll be like, "Oh, I was sick and I had a surgery." For what? And then they're just a blank slate. And you know, I feel like there's a lot of people I hear that, you know, they have this distance from each other, and they go, "Oh, okay, well, they were in the hospital and we need to be conscientious that they have their own space. So we'll just give them the space to not ask." But they have their own choice. They can answer or not answer. So for me, I learn very quickly about people, because I will just like, "For what did you go to the hospital for? What? What is that? Was it scary?" and all those questions, they could say, "Oh, I don't want to talk about it now." But you can also, we're human beings. We can read each other. I can read if they get uptight. And I go, okay, well, I'm not going to ask that. But if it's genuine curiosity from a positive place, which is what children are coming from, people want to share because that's nice to connect. And so, yeah, so I feel like that children, that we lose that as adults. That not only the aspect of play, but the aspect of curiosity. Well, we shouldn't know that. Or there's culture that said, well, we should give them space. We don't need to, do that.
Yeah. You are making me think of a few years back, I was writing about the notion of childlike faith, and wrote like a little bit. It's an essay I wrote on a blog that I had in 2017. So I'm not going to share the raw details of it, but the nugget of that I still sit with is this idea that to have childlike faith isn't this idea of like just blindly following. Children ask a ton of questions. So I think the idea of having childlike faith is being able to just be curious and keep asking why, and just, come from that place of joy and whimsy and like, hey, what's that about?
Yeah, and that's where I did go to eventually, which I asked so many questions that I couldn't go, okay, well, these stories are real. For me, I couldn't believe that they were. And that was sad for me. But I could take those other elements that I did, like gratitude, or like having faith in humanity, and just going, okay, there's going to be bad things. I'm going to have things stolen from me. That's definitely happened. I feel like, but I've had it so many times where people go, why are you leaving the doors of your car unlocked while you're going and like unloading gear? Why are you doing this, or why are you doing that? And it's because because I still have faith in people, even though there's a few, the overall are good. And that's what I've always, that's part of what I took away from a community of religion.
Would you say that that theater and comedy and sort of what you do is sort of like I've had a lot of theater people on the show, and like we explore like the idea of like theater as its own church. Is that something that resonates with you, or you connect with?
Absolutely, because it's still, you take that with it's again that community, right? There's not in this day and age, there's less and less communities that people get together in person and do whatever thing it is together with a collective purpose. And having some collective purpose is really nice. It gives us, not only does it give us something to do, but it gives us once we accomplish whatever that goal is, we can celebrate that, which is exactly what a church does. Like on Sunday, they have the sermon. Some people do some parts that they worked on that week. The kids go so that they're not wiggling around and bored. And then you go to the basement and everybody has cookies or something, like that kind of thing. You go into the other room where like everybody bought a potluck, and then we can celebrate. So we celebrate, like we did it. We did the thing. And then we can share what happened with the week. And that type of community is really nice. And now absolutely, like, it changes depending on the group. Like the born again Christian group, I could read that the people were holding things back. Like, oh, I see that you didn't come to church last Sunday. Oh, that's an interesting pin, Diane. And all these things where they're actually attacking, but they're veiled in different types of sentences. It's the subtext is actually aggressive. Whereas other churches, everyone's just super chill and nice. And what type of, I think part of it is what type of sect is it? And also and who is the leader there too? Because different leaders are just not going to be cool with allowing that.
For sure. And some of it is the particular theological viewpoint. Like if the God you believe in is makes you check a bunch of boxes or you're unworthy, that's a different vibe than a internalized goodness.
I understand why the Hawaiian people changed when the Dutch came from their polytheistic religion to monotheism within Christianity, because at the time when the Dutch came, and I forget when it was, the 1500s. I don't remember where it was, so excuse me, but it was long ago at this point. But when the Dutch came, there was a certain ruler at the time, Hawaiian ruler, who really felt that they needed a lot of sacrifices. And there was smoke that used to go off all the time in these different temples. Outside of these temples, if the smoke touched you, you were sacrificed. And so, but the people had to still go to the temples. So eventually, so many people were getting sacrificed for so many different reasons. The Dutch came and were like, there's this dude named Jesus, and you can all go to heaven, and it's great. And they're like, oh, cool. And then do we sacrifice ourselves to him? And they're like, just not, like, what? And they're like, do we kill each other for Jesus? And the Dutch are like, no. And the Hawaiians are like, you know what? This is great. And then they burned their temples down.
Oh, wow.
And they switched to Christianity. And to this day, a lot of native Hawaiians are still although they will have elements of their polytheism, and they still will believe that. There's a lot of them who are very devout Christian. And that all comes down to the Dutch coming in.
I had not gone down that research rabbit hole at all. Is there a particular book or podcast or something that sort of led you down that rabbit hole?
No.
Okay.
I just love religion and love theology. And so when I've been to Hawaii multiple times. And I was the first time I went to Hawaii, it was what kickstarted that. Cause I knew they were polytheistic, but I didn't know what their gods were. And they have amazing gods. They're so awesome. But I needed to find out more. And so I simply just did a lot of research, and I purchased books on the Hawaiian religion, but there's no specific one.
Okay, cool. But that's a rabbit hole you went down also with people you were talking to in Hawaii and all that good stuff. So yeah. And
also going into the community, into the native parts of the community where they're like, why is this not Hawaiian person here? But me learning about their culture and then understanding that it was interesting to me how devoutly Christian some of them were.
For sure.
And it also reminds me of the Norwegians as well.
Yeah. Tell me I don't know much about Norwegian religion either.
You have Thor.
Yeah.
Odin.
Yeah.
And so we got that. And so within that religion, which is now considered mythology, same as with Egyptian, that is all considered mythology now, right? And so there was a point. I don't remember when this was, but it was a king, emperor, whatever the ruler was at the time. He became Christian, and he said to all of the Norwegians, if you do not become Christian, you will be killed if you do not convert. And so everyone, there was definitely a lot of death, and then a bunch of people converted. And so I asked a person who was Norwegian, who grew up in Oslo, Norway, and I was teaching an improv class there. And I asked him, and he was actually playing Jesus for a public television show at the time in Norway. And I said to him, "What?" I got a lot of interesting stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
I said, "What? So you're very devoutly Christian." He said, "Yeah." I said, "But you're also fully Norwegian." And he said, "Yes." And I said, "So how do you feel that?" And I want you to think about. Don't answer this today. I want you to think about it and come back to me tomorrow for class. But how do you feel that your cultural religion was changed because murder was the option? Thereby, everyone converted because otherwise they would be dead. And he said, And I said, "Don't answer it now. I'm wondering how you feel about that. Because if that hadn't happened, you would potentially, Odin would be your Zeus in that sense, if you're going back to Greek." And so the next morning, he answered how I thought he would answer, which was that that they saw the light, they saw the right way to be. And I felt like that for someone who was extremely devout, in the way that he was. If he didn't answer with that in a way, then it would be a lot of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's how he felt about it, was that they saw the light. And it was the same answer actually for the Hawaiians that I asked the same question to. And they really felt like, well, the Dutch really let them see the true way, the true way to be. And so then also in that instance of eventually the Nordic religion becoming mythology, I've thought to myself and said to different pastors and priests, how many people do you think it will take to stop believing in Christianity until it becomes mythology? And there's a little brain teaser.
I don't know what to do with that.
It's just a brain teaser. It's simply that. It's because those people believed in it wholeheartedly. And now the world calls it mythology.
Yeah.
I love theology. I love it.
Yeah, no. Well, and it's so it's fascinating to look at it in these different cultural contexts, and like of course the story of freaking colonialism is all over all of that. But I think bringing it down to like individual stories and how they process the deep history, I think is important, and like a more accessible way to process these larger conversations. Like I would like to say I'm a biographer, not a historian. Like I like hearing individual stories and how they work in these different frameworks, because it is such a deep and nuanced thing. And I like how you said with like the Norwegian man, especially, like you can tell that there would be some cognitive dissonance, and you can see the gears turning to just sort of make peace with that, like there's
that's how if that's his world, that's hard. But I wondered what his answer would be, simply.
No, absolutely.
But all of them shift from somewhere else. Like I think about, that's partially what I love about theology, is also understanding where these parts come from. Like I love how I remember teaching my nieces and nephew about religion, and explaining how I said, "Do you see these discs? And the sun discs behind their head?" And I said, "So Constantine Do you know the story of Constantine?
More or less, but
Roman.
Yeah.
Constantine who was the Roman emperor in like the 4th century, he knew that the Roman empire was not doing well, and Christianity was starting to take over, which was not good because it was like really screwing with their main religion, which was sun worshipping, which is, and people say pagan, but really pagan is just anything that's not whatever Christianity is, right? So within that, whatever type of Christianity it is. So eventually Constantine said, okay, there was no official Roman religion. But then he said, okay, it's Christianity is the official Roman religion. He was trying to do it as a move to solidify that he agreed with these people. He was giving an olive branch to say, let's all be nice, and the Roman Empire, we can be strong together. It didn't work out in the end. But what it did do, him saying that the Roman Empire's official religion was Christianity, then shifted everything, and then all those people spread out in the world, and then thereby converted a lot of other people. And then we still have the sun discs in artwork because they were sun worshippers.
Oh, that Christianity just popping up everywhere. Oh my goodness. So I feel like there are so many stories that can be told about theology. I wanted to sort of pivot and just talk about like what do you have going on with your music?
I did not release a lot last year. I was super stressed out by like all the stuff. And also I had there was suddenly an insane amount of live gigs, which was great. And so I was not as focused on digital content. And I released a comedy album, I think either early last year or I think it was the previous year. I released
October,
a live comedy album.
2020, something like that.
Yeah, I think it was fall of 2020. And then the previous year I released a Halloween album. And so I have a upcoming comedy album of studio tracks. And then there's a bunch of cover songs that I've been recording over the years, which I don't know when it's going to be released, but I'm excited for that to be released. And then there's more podcast episodes. The next episode it's about a serial killer, and it's terrifying to me. I know some people are going to love it, but I'm like actually scared of this episode. Like, I can't watch serial killer things. It makes me feel terrified, and so I don't like it. But the person was like, "Can we do one on serial killers?" And I was like, yeah, okay, sure. So it's a serial killer episode about a female serial killer.
Nice.
So it's going to be so funny about the serial killer. I was like, during the recording of it, I was like, how can I make this
funny? So my habit is I listen to this show on my drive home when it's very dark and foggy. Is that maybe not? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, this episode gives me the heebie-jeebies. But I suppose it is a woman who's serial killing men who she feels wronged her. So
good for her.
Maybe in that sense, you'll be like, yeah.
Cool.
Just to like a lighter degree, you'll be like, I won't kill him, but
yeah, that's definitely a vibe. Awesome. Well, I guess before we close out, any like final thoughts, anything you wanted to make sure that you say, anything? This has gone a lot of places, as these conversations are wont to do.
This is really fun. I don't tend to get the chance to discuss theology, so I really appreciate the ability to.
Yeah. I think like the really core thing that we found was this idea of whimsy and like having this like childlike viewpoint, and I'm glad that you and I share that, which I had a suspicion, but I was very cool to hear that from you.
Oh, good. Yeah. Yes. Just being open to being curious.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. And where can people find you?
The easiest place is my website, which is mattgriffo.com. But then you could find it on any of the streaming platforms. If you just type in Matt Griffo, you'll find it, which is Griffo.
Cool. And I'll put some of those links in the show notes. Awesome.
It's a short one, but it's Italian. For an Italian one, it's a short one.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for listening to Faith and What Resonates. The theme song is My Journey, My Song, the first song I wrote back when I was 19. Thanks, past Gail. Thanks again to Matt Griffo for being on the show. You'll find links to his stuff in the show notes. This is the last episode of this quarter. I'll be back in April with more episodes. Make sure you're subscribed to this podcast in whatever app you use to listen to the show. You'll notice that this show shares a podcast feed with other New Faith New Media shows, including A Pastor and a Priest Walk into a Movie Theater. If you want to support New Faith New Media, you can support our crowdfunding campaign at bit.ly/nfnmindie, or support by becoming a patron on our Patreon, or leaving a one-time donation through Buy Me a Coffee. Finally, if you want to find out more about the other things that I do in the world, head to gailgallaghermusic.com. Thanks for listening, and remember to stay curious and follow the magic of the things that resonate.